I've been excited to talk about this for a while because it's a topic that's on everybody's heart and mind, and we're reading about it, we're seeing it, and we're trying to wrap our minds around the complexity of this issue, especially as it relates to this next generation, Gen Z. And we're talking about the teenage mental health crisis that exists here in America and really all over the world at this point. So let's dive into it. First off, welcome back to Some Friendly Faces. Tyler.
Hello.
That's a real
you're only
listen.
Many of you are just listening to us right now, but if you're watching, there's the friendly face that I was looking for because you had a pissed off face about 5 seconds ago, right?
Well,
but now this is softness.
I have to have them take me seriously, so I've got to lead in with.
Okay. Mr. Tyler Schuetze's in the house. I'm glad you're here,
Hello,
Tyler.
everybody.
If you're listening in, just imagine Laura Linney, but with like a buzz cut. High and tight.
That's a really good analogy, but I don't think anyone knows who Lauren Linney is. Give me one famous show, movie she's in.
I don't know. My stepmom's name is Laura Tinney, so that's the only reason I know Laura Linney.
Okay. All right.
And
then we also have Mr. Aaron Alba in the house, still thinking the man bun is cool, but has gone the way of uncool.
It's getting bigger.
I just want to cut it off, but the lady who cuts my hair keeps saying no.
If you're imagining Aaron Alba in your head, just imagine Post Malone without the face tats.
Yeah, just
like a reformed Post
We
Malone.
are on
like
a roll here.
That's right.
Yeah,
we are on a roll.
Yeah,
for
Free
sure.
Malone.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't going to call names, but Fat Joe definitely.
Well, okay, so let's keep this going. We got Zach Tinney in the house here. Who does Zach remind you of?
Please.
Ooh.
You can go to Joe.
Okay.
Who, Bradley Cooper?
Yeah, Joe looks like Bradley Cooper.
That's Joe.
How is that an insult?
I got that, a lot this week.
A little more gray.
Yeah, a little more gray, yes. Yeah. I'm a little bit stronger than he is.
There we go.
And then
I've saw Limo.
who does Zach look
so.
like?
I've seen him in Philly. You think you are?
Yeah.
Stunt
Thank
double.
you. There it is.
Stunt double.
Zach looks like he looks like he with his shirt, his striped shirt, he could have been like a Russian or like French bomber or something. Because he just looks European.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Everybody
like
at
your
home
average
is
criminal,
really
everybody.
confused.
It's just the helmet here, actually.
Yeah.
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 Great. That's perfect.
A revolutionary, you could
Yeah.
say.
All
Zach
right.
looks like a revolutionary.
I actually
Okay.
like that.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
was what I
That's
meant.
right.
I didn't mean
That was really nice.
it was like a
Beautiful.
V for Vendetta type thing.
I'm going to share a pet peeve of mine, and that is like when I'm scrolling through podcasts and I find a topic that I really like, and then I'm like, oh, I'm excited, and I hit play, and then they just start rambling, and I never
like
know when
30
they're
minutes.
actually going to get into the thing, and I'm sitting there waiting. I wasted 5 minutes of my life.
Well,
So
as soon as you're done rambling, we'll start this podcast.
let's start it. Okay. All right. Our
You
main
gonna introduce Luke?
Yes, I'm getting to that. Give me a second. The whole reason we're here, the man of the hour, Mr. Luke Frazier,
podcast better not be an
executive
hour.
director of Depression to Extinction.
That's right.
And man, I like Luke Frazier, like I'm introducing a boxer, man.
a cool
It's
name.
like-
That feels
man.
really nice. You know,
Doesn't it?
I spent most of my life thinking that name was not that great.
Yeah.
So that's
Now it
awesome.
is.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I like it.
And if you're
It's not a
It's not a
watching,
stage name. It's
if-
not-
Yeah.
if you're watching right now, you already know who Luke looks like, right? Who is it?
Celebrity pastor Stephen Furtick.
Celebrity pastor
Wow.
Stephen Furtick in the house.
Yeah.
Bro, you've got some money. There's
Yeah.
there's somebody calling right now.
Is
We
wait,
have
this guy
we
is
have our
popular.
first call in. This is our first
Whoa.
caller. Hang on.
Should we do
Let's
a check-in
see.
with them?
Yeah, I'm gonna see who it is. Hello.
He definitely needs to be checked
AT&T.
in.
AT&T.
man.
It's only AT&T that's gonna bust up this podcast. Ryan, I just switched to Verizon today.
Good job. Verizon's better.
I didn't know
Done.
house phones were still a thing.
They're not.
I don't know what that is.
My
It's like a
79-year-old mother who
fossil.
lives with us makes us have this because you never know when you're going to need it.
You should
anymore.
see Joe's fax machine.
I know
It's
when
beautiful.
you're not gonna need it. In the middle of this podcast.
We're going to see who
This
else
is
calls.
wild. This is
All right.
wild.
All right. So, Luke,
Yes.
all right, we're going to start this off with broad-based discussion
Broad-based.
on this teenage mental health crisis in America, man.
Mm-hmm.
We're all experiencing it from different angles. When we think about the problem that's facing this generation, how do you put it into words? How do you describe it to others? especially people that may not be tuned in and may not think there's that much going on.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think the first place we start is trying to educate that there is a stigma around depression, anxiety, mental health in general, right? It's hard for people to talk about. I don't want to talk about how I'm feeling. I never have. I was never taught that was okay. And so when we look at like social media, which is probably one of the biggest factors right now, people just want to share their best life, right? I'm sure you guys have used the hashtag before, but it really, our kind of target and the way that we're breaking it down is trying to come back to this place of education that it's starting at earlier ages. It's starting from these parents. It's starting from younger and younger ages. And so we'll go to the stats and say, the last 10 years, youth suicide, 12 to 18-year-olds, have gone up like 15%.
Wow. Wait,
15%.
15%.
So we're looking at like last year. I actually don't know what the suicide rate for 12 to 18-year-olds last year was, but you can probably factor out from 300 million people in the world who are facing depression, 300 million in the U.S. are facing depression. About 3 million of them are 12 to 18-year-olds in the U.S. The majority of them are not getting any kind of care. And one of the things that our organization does, and one of the stats that kind of irks me the most, is that people are like, oh, our schools are doing something. We have counselors. And there's like one counselor for every 300 students. And I don't know about you guys, but in one day, like, I go from happy and excited to like the world hates me, and most of these kids, due to social media, due to their parents, due to whatever. I mean, there's so many different factors to it, and we could probably get into that. But again, overarching, there's a lot in here. It's really, it's complex. And I mean, I could go off in 20 different tangents, but, we got our focus is getting back to this emotional awareness.
Yeah. I think even in that's so real. Like, I think about my high school experience, which I've tried really hard to forget. And I never even went to the counselor. Because I didn't want to share this because of that stigma.
I would have never wanted to.
It was a sign of weakness.
Right.
And so really, if you're in the counselor, then something's already happened. Somebody's already noticed.
Right.
So many times they just slip through the cracks and keep going. Right. And working with students locally, Leander ISD, we had 5 suicides 2 semesters ago.
Yeah.
One semester.
Right.
Starting
rough.
at the age of like 12 or 13 years old. Yeah. It was insane. I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. And everybody's grappling with, what do we do?
Right.
Yeah. So depression is one piece of this when we talk about mental health. How else do we describe what's all under this umbrella that especially teens are dealing with?
In terms of like diagnoses?
Exactly.
Well, anxiety is another huge one, and that's going to show up in a million different ways. Underneath that, you have people dealing with mania, which can come from depression. I mean, unfortunately, like the possibilities are kind of endless with what kind of diagnoses that you could get into. We really don't like to, and this is funny. Like, our name is Depression to Extinction. We don't like to focus on those high level things all the time.
Okay.
Like, again, we want to get right down to talking about how you're feeling. And why you're feeling a certain way. Because, again, I think if I start talking about, well, I am bipolar, I am depressed, I am this, we start putting these labels on ourselves that come with the stigma, and can hurt people even more.
I feel like some of that stuff can be almost like you getting on WebMD. As soon as you start finding some names and labels, you start attributing other things that you weren't even feeling, and kind of project them onto yourself sometimes. And I've seen a lot of teenagers, or even just anyone of any age, just like, oh, they're going through this, maybe I'm going through this as well. And sometimes that can be good for the self-awareness, but sometimes it just freaks you out, and you take some possibly normal things and build them on until you've got this major I'm psychotic thing, or maybe I'm not, or I'm not going to talk about this at all because now I'm scared. And they kind of shut down instead of just working through, hey, here's where I'm at right now in this moment today. what do I need to do about that?
Because I think middle school or high school both really just come with some level of anxiety and depression.
Man, I
and
was
mood
in
swings.
feels.
You're learning all of your feelings, and there's
You're
all
going
these
through
chemicals.
puberty, like it's crazy.
And we want to identify, like, what do I do with these things? Where are they coming from? And there's a healthy way to do that.
Yeah.
Then if we get on WebMD and we start looking at everything through that lens of depression, bipolar, whatever, like that becomes how we see our existence.
Oh yeah.
We don't have the tools to be able to process through this stuff.
For sure.
So let's back up just a step, and we'll circle back this question around to Luke, but I know Aaron, Tyler, you guys have been open in the past about talking about depression, things like that. Tyler, I remember back in the day we even shot videos together, on depression. You remember those?
Yeah, those are good times. Got me out of bed that day.
Yeah.
I feel that.
But like, so like from your perspective, what do you think is one of the big causes of maybe the rise in mental health concerns among young people today?
Yeah, because I think there's this stuff that all people of all times have always dealt with to a degree. Like, I mean, especially when you're going through that age, I mean, teenage years, you're just like a big ball of energy in the form of emotions that's primarily, I guess what's so big about today is even though everyone has always gone through a level of that, it's so unguided today.
Yeah.
It's mass energy. It's a wildfire that can go in any directions because it's not really funneled into a healthy way to guide, hey, here's what you're feeling here, or just fight through it here, or it's kind of that step by step. Right now, it's you just now, like you said, get on social media and you see that everyone's doing everything that is so much greater and so much better or accomplished, and you assume it's real and you assume you're supposed to be there. So all of a sudden you get even more anxiety. Yeah. At the same time, there's less real mentors, less parenting going on, and to really funnel that in the right direction. So it's left to its own to try and figure itself out. You're almost mentoring yourself and guiding yourself, or you're finding a bad YouTube video with very little information potentially, you're very much like me and you get into this whole emo genre, which I love it all. And I found a lot of great artists through that, but there's so much content out there that's just kind of just go insane. You're insane. Embrace it, and just some really, really bad guidance through that. So
yeah, totally.
There's nothing solid to stand on.
To that point, I mean, we talk a lot about peers, parents, and pop culture, like the major influences on teens. And pop culture, YouTube, that's where a lot of people are going. With social media, we're more connected than ever before, but we feel more lonely and isolated. And the level of comparison, what we try and measure up to, is so unreachable, just insane. I know, my phone just fell. I know that with our interns, and you led the intern program, we would always push them towards counseling and mandated 6 counseling sessions. And we'd always get pushback. Oh man, no, I'm good. I got this. I'm not going to counseling. That's where you go if you're broken. And
oh yeah,
you speak
even
to that. Maybe.
Even the ones that liked to say, "Yeah, I'm for that. That sounds great." For some reason, they would still take them months to actually book it. Going from that mental of I support that and think that's a good thing to expressing that through action. Yeah, that's crazy. There's such a mental block of. I know it's good to talk about these things. It's good to unload what's inside and kind of buried. And I know I've got my tics and my issues that I've got that I don't really want to talk to anyone about. But actually bringing them up and discussing them and dissecting that and getting in your feels over something that's happened to you or a discomfort you feel in life with someone, that is not easy.
So here's a thought. Is depression really on the rise, or is it at the same crazy level it's always been at? We just live in a time where it's a little bit more safer to confess it and talk about it. What do you think? Is it, you think really more people struggle with it today than they did in the past? And if so, why? Or maybe it's always been
I think
high.
it's both. I think kind of we've always had relationship issues throughout history, right? Between a brother and a sister and a parent and a child and a friend and a friend. And so you look at those issues didn't just end, they evolved with culture. And so I think you look at, had this conversation with about kind of the millennial digital age awakening, kind of the relationship between this awakening of the digital age and our mental health recognition with some parents I'm friends with at this church down the road. And they were telling, the grandparents were in town for graduation. They were saying, when we were growing up, we had this thing called like house phone, or we had like family phone, or whatever it was called. Different houses would share the same phone line. And like, if
that's exactly what I've been doing.
Yes.
This whole there you go.
But I think they were saying is like neighbors would share the same phone.
Yeah.
And I was literally so interested in it. I didn't know why, but I think when I like kind of unpacked that later after talking to these two sets of grandparents, it was the one little thing that really stuck out was the lack of dependence on communication to the outside world, and more of a focus on what's in front of you. And I think I've noticed that as our phones have gotten brighter, the screens have gotten brighter in our lives. We're searching for answers that are miles away when the answers are right in front of our face, and it's right, and it's in a mirror. And I think so that, and coupled with like everyone's always had problems for years, but a generation behind us, like my parents, like it wasn't normal to talk about. Like I come from a Hispanic upbringing, and I remember hanging out with some of my church friends and my mom a couple months ago, and one of the girls said, "Hey, Aaron's mom, tell us an embarrassing story about Aaron." And she was like, "Oh, his dad didn't let him cry when he was a kid." And then no one laughed, and I looked at her and I said, "What?" And she was like, "Haha, right?" And that's not a commentary on my dad, that's a commentary on the culture and the upbringing of that generation. It was, if you had a problem, stop crying, bite your lip, and then go back to work. And it was like, well, that doesn't address everything. And is that a commentary on the entire generation as a whole being broken? Yes. Just like every generation's broken, because no one's perfect. And there's problems in 20, 50 years from now that our generation is going to be harped on and say, well, why didn't you guys? Why didn't the millennials? Why didn't y'all figure out this? Why didn't you like monitor phone usage? Why did you? And so, yeah, it's just we're inheriting the problems of the generation before us. And with that goes back to that family phone, that house phone was, you didn't need to talk to everyone all the time. You didn't need, you sat down with the people in front of you. So I think the disconnect from the real world, your family, has led to a disconnect from reality, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So both.
I think it's also what you're saying, though, like each generation pushes the bar a little bit higher, right? Like we stand on the shoulders who go before us.
Yeah.
And so now where we're at culturally, we're not just a job. We're not a 9-to-5. It's not just about putting money on the table, but it is what we talk about a lot, which is holistic student development, which really is just caring about the whole person, wholehearted living, I think is what Brene Brown calls it. Yeah. And so now we're concerned like with feelings and what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. That's a part of who you are. Yeah. And for the first time, we're able to talk about these things, especially thanks to social media and other things, counselors, those who've gone before us.
I think culture is like a huge thing that decides what the whole generation is going to let this kind of form of frustration out on. I mean, I think there's no point in history was there no issues, but the way individuals and then the whole society actually deals with those issues, it kind of manifests in different ways, and it can come out as anger, it can come out as a depression, it can come out as just bearing, which is what a lot of cultures really do. We live in a culture right now that is so driven to succeed, to prove yourself with, it's the Instagram thing, and that's becoming more of the whole world.
Yeah.
Not be present, like Aaron said. And it kind of, I think, lends to that depression side, because being angry and lashing out is not, I don't think it's looked so highly on by our culture right now. It is more of that be aware, be sensitive kind of thing. That is, it's kind of head in, which is a good thing. So now that people are allowed to kind of release that frustration in that way, it's starting to show up a little more, at least in that form of depression. And give me your thoughts on that. I might be completely off base with it, but
yeah, I agree with you. Weird, interesting enough, an imagery that came up in my head earlier that kind of connects to a lot of this stuff is like issues being present all the time. Is like you said, the solution's always present, and there's a recognition amongst like the older generation, like, oh, like there's counselors there's things in place. And the first thing that popped in my head was a Band-Aid. And I was thinking, like, if you got cut and there was a box of Band-Aids across the room and you're like, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, can you give me a Band-Aid? They would say, well, yeah, but there's a Band-Aid right there. It's fine, right? And it's like, well, no, I need to apply it. No, I need to get the solution and put it in front of me. It's not just because it's across the room doesn't solve the problem. It's when it's in the room with me and when it's applied to the wound. And I think that No, I totally agree with everything you just said. I just wanted to throw that in there. Thought it sounded cool.
Thank you, Parent.
Being really honest with you.
That's good.
So, Luke, you're in this world all day long. What? Tell us a story. Your story. I introduced you as the executive director. I know you're also the co-founder here. So, how did Depression to Extinction get started? And why did you say, "I'm devoting my life to this. I'm going all in"? What's the story?
It's funny. I think I have to remind myself that I made that decision every single day. Like, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I look at my childhood and it looks great. Like I guess semi not normal. I have 8 siblings, so I'm number 3. There was 5 biological boys my parents had. We adopted the 4 youngest. We're a biracial family. It's amazing. I love it. Wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. It wasn't until probably a couple months ago that I really understood why I got into this work. And as I look back on my for me, and my co-founder is another whole crazy story, which we could get in another day. But for me, again, beautiful childhood. But I moved. I was in I think 15 different houses by the time I was 12. We just moved around a lot. Like there was no rhyme or reason that I understood. My dad just kept getting better jobs. And so that meant I would go to different schools. And I was a short little, kind of athletic kid. And I just got really good at like fitting in. And that became my MO. Like just fit in, find the cool kids, do what everybody else is doing, and like then you'll be seen. So I kind of learned again over the past few months that like I've been living under this pattern of just wanting to be seen my whole life. There were a couple times that I would never have identified it as depression, but I think it was just really dark moments for me as a kid. Again, being in a big family, trying to be seen, that started leading me down dark paths where I would like go over to the knife drawer, pick a knife out, and just like hold it to my chest until someone came into the room. And obviously it was like a call to cry for help. Like there wasn't anything going on. If I looked at the same child today, I would like, we'd try to coddle him, or not coddle him, like hold him and really like find what's going on.
Right.
I don't think anyone ever took the time to figure out what was going on with me. And I think that's what sort of got me to spin into, again, finding external things that proved who I was. And so, going into college, it was the same kind of thing. And I was a guy, and I grew up in a family of mostly men, so I was just going to stuff everything down. No reason I should look at it. Why would I? And when I was 22, I ended up going to this sort of spiritual weekend men's retreat kind of thing. And I was like, oh, like I'm fine. Like I'm good. Like I don't need any of that. Like I'm built up. I know who I am. I'm into like personal development, all that kind of good stuff. And by the end of the weekend, I was like in tears, realized I had this childhood issue and had to address it. And up until that point, and this was like kind of the big change for me, up until that point, I never recalled my dad ever telling me he loved me, ever hugging me, ever, showing any kind of affection. And it like got me to this point of like, well, why didn't he ever do that to me? And for some reason that weekend, I was sort of pushed into this move of like, oh, I can initiate that. So a week later, I sat down with my dad and was like, look, and I tried to look back at the way he was raised. His father left his mom, like his dad came home and was just drinking after work. Like I could never imagine that. And so my dad was really good at playing sports with us and playing games and making sure we were having fun. But there was that side of love and affection that I never received and I never knew what to do with. And so I was like, Dad, I love you. This may be weird, but we never say that. I would love to say it more, and it'd be cool if you said that to me. And so, that was this weird catalyst for me to say, wait a second, I have a lot more emotions here that I'm not dealing with. And it's been a really painful process over the past 3 to 5 years of like realizing I have a lot of other like weird childhood stuff. And if you look at my childhood, it looks great. So, now in this position, we really started this organization, and me and my co-founder, because we had our own childhood stuff that we never really figured out until now. And he's actually 20 years older than me and just figuring his stuff out. And it's like, wow, if I had this when I was that age, the game would be different. And so our whole thing working with teens and adults is like, let's figure out what your sort of patterns that you're already dealing with. Everyone's parents are going to mess them up no matter what. You know, every generation has something wrong with them, and they're going to teach their kids something really good, and they're going to teach their kids something really bad, and they're not going to mean to. It's just the way this world works. And so whether it ends up being a depression or it ends up being a bipolar or an anxiety, we want to start to teach the process, and we'll talk about it at some point later, this idea of checking in emotionally on a regular basis, just like I would stretch on a regular basis, just like I would go practice for a game before I went out in the field. Like we practice things, and this is one thing we need to do, is to dive more into our mental practice. And unfortunately, even still today as our executive director, it's not something that I am the best at. I strive to it, but there are, just last week I was like breaking down because I thought the world didn't love me. But that's not to say that I can't live in the world, and I can't work in the world, and I can't work with other kids doing that. I think it just makes it that much more real, and that makes it that much more relatable.
That's real. There's a lot of good stuff to unpack there.
For sure. There is.
So in the next episode, because this is going to lead to a part 2, right?
Yes.
Talk about some tools and some ways that we can work through some of this stuff. We're going to do a check-in and actually break some of this down. But a couple quick thoughts from what you said. One, a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, social media guy, but I also think he's like a secular prophet.
He's insane.
I think he understands a move of culture that's coming, which talks a lot to like middle schoolers and high schoolers who don't deal with their stuff end up being parents of middle schoolers and high schoolers who have the same stuff. And so learning to deal with this stuff wherever you're at, like if you're a parent listening to this, just push pause and think and create some space. So maybe go text your kid, or if you're a kid, push pause and go and talk to your parents. That sounds so mutually healing. And my story is actually a lot like that. We're able to love our parents to healing, and they're able to help love us to healing. I know we all have daddy. We're all probably
we all have dad issues. Come on, everyone has dad issues.
What's a dad?
And it just got me thinking, like, I wish I had daddy. But it got me thinking of some of the socially acceptable destructive coping mechanisms that I exercised in high school and college that looked okay to the world, but I was a mess and broken inside. Right. But if you party, if you drink, like that's cool. It looks cool. Like it looks like you got it going together, but it was like a cry for help. And so
that's the thing, though, and I think why the check-ins that you're talking about are like so important, because I think no one wants to acknowledge that they're there, and it's not real if you don't. But it's like if you don't just check in and evaluate what's actually there, it's gonna come out either way, friend. It's gonna be you mouthing off to someone when you don't mean it, being super self-destructive, getting into some stuff that you don't actually even like doing, trying to build a different identity. And you don't even know why. It's just something. It's gonna come out as you just feeling it. It's just these crazy urges, and it's gonna be even more confusing.
If we can't control our emotions, they're gonna control us.
You're not gonna know where they come from. It's gonna feel random, but it's not random at all.
Right,
because you never contained it.
And it's sort of an additive problem to our millennial Gen Z, the kid. We're all kids, right? It's an additive problem because then it's like, well, now the world is wronging me. They're screwing me over, and then it looks like an entitlement issue, but really like we just can't handle our emotions.
So this is all great, man. The organization is called Depression to Extinction. I know those that are listening, watching right now are hungry for tools. What are you doing for this problem? How do we do this? And what I love about your organization is you've come at this with a very simple but accurate and easy kind of approach that anybody can do, right? You're putting it in the hands of teens. You're putting it in the hands of parents, and you're starting to educate around this. And so in part 2 of this, we're going to get into that. And I know, Luke, you're going to model some of this, especially what you call checking in with us. And we're going to talk about tangible ways that if you can maybe even identify some of these issues, but what do you do? What are the solutions here That's what we're going to get into. How do people find you guys?
Yeah.
Depression to Extinction. Was a website, social media? What's your kind of go-to?
Yeah, so I mean, you can head right over to the website www.depression2extinction.org. It's the number 2.
The number 2. Okay.
And we're find us on Facebook, same thing, Instagram, Twitter, a little bit on YouTube, but we're always connecting on social media.
Okay, sweet. So I highly encourage you to check out the second part of this. Stay tuned for it. Click play as we get into the details of it. But until then, go to depressiontoextinction.org. Their site is actually really clean, very easy to navigate. You're going to learn a lot of good stuff, and then we're going to get into this.
Awesome.
So thanks
so much, guys.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.